Hello and welcome. This is the second part of the special shows of the series of shows which we are having on the Victory Project, the book I'm talking about. The first part, Saurabh Mukherjea of Marcellus Investment spoke to us about some of the businessmen, top performers, how they unlock their full potential and how you can also go about unlocking your full potential, the 6 steps he speaks about in this book. This is the second part of the same show where we are talking about, Saurabh and I, about someone who belongs to the capital market from the world of finance, and that too far away, all the way. Joining us today from Florida is Mr. Jason Voss. Jason, of course, has been an active fund manager, top performer, has beaten the benchmarks, and now is a consultant and helps companies beat the market. Of course, he's an author as well, and he's one of the examples which Saurabh has used in his book to determine how exactly top performers, what are those practices, how do they go about conducting their lives, which brings out the best out of them and hence their peak potential. Saurabh and Jason, both of you. Saurabh, nice to have you back. Yeah. And Jason, thank you so much for joining this show and helping us, our viewers, understand your own style better, and of course to bring out the best of this book. Gentlemen,
pleasure to be here.
Thanks Ajay, thanks for inviting me back.
Great. Saurabh, let me start with understanding from you about Jason. How did you think about observing his style, his practices as a fund manager, as a person of finance, and why did you go about including Jason as one of the examples of top performers in your book?
So Ajay, I happen to be a CFA charter holder, and at one of our conferences, we were told that this is a great book, Intuitive Investor by Jason Voss. I think Jason had come to India to speak at that conference. So I went home, ordered the book, and read the Intuitive Investor. I have to confess, when I picked up the book, I was quite cynical. I said, how on earth can there be a link between meditation and fund management? This is around 4 or 5 years ago, Ajay. And as I read the Intuitive Investor, I realized, my God, what he's saying is not just useful. I should have realized this 10 years ago. So I implemented elements of what Jason has talked about in the book. For example, subduing your ego, subduing your egoic mind, giving yourself time to recover from the stresses and strains of the job. And over time, the sort of tendency to mix spirituality with investing became a part of my day-to-day lifestyle. And hence, when Anupam and I started writing the Victory Project a couple of years back, we realized that one way to bring an unusual angle into the book would be to see if we can bring the spirituality aspect that we had learned from Jason, from the Intuitive Investor, could we weave it into the simplicity paradigm. So in that chapter on spirituality, for us it was a no-brainer that we call Jason Voss in Florida and ask him to opine on the subject of how meditation, how spirituality helps in the context of fund management, and I think more generally how spirituality and meditation helps in the context of hitting peak performance in whichever line of work you happen to be in.
Great. In fact, let's get you hear from Jason himself. Jason, talk to us about your own introduction to meditation, and how did you stumble upon this idea and practice, which of course is thousands of years old, but only a small section of society actually goes about actively practicing it. Talk to us about when did you get introduced to meditation, and how has it changed your life and the way you conduct your life?
Oh my goodness, it's such a fun story. I'm so glad you asked. I was 7 years old. My mom received a long distance phone call when that used to be a big deal, and it was very expensive for that call to happen. And I had been taught several weeks prior how to put on a record player, a vinyl record. That's how long ago this was. This is 1977. And I put on a record. It was the Rolling Stones' Gimme Shelter. And I was so moved by the music, I started running around in circles. And I had a very transcendent experience, which I didn't think had anything to do with the running in circles and what I was doing. I thought it had to do with the music. such as the emotional and intellectual technology of a 7-year-old. But what I remembered from that moment was, wow, I have to listen to more music. And so music and resting my mind became a practice. And in my late teens, I had a girlfriend who was a meditator, a formal meditator. And she said, this practice that you do called going introspective, which is what I called it, is actually meditation. And I had been raised as an atheist, and I thought that was craziness. I would never want to be caught dead meditating. And she convinced me, no, you are in fact meditating, and that's what this practice is. And I had always set aside probably 30 minutes to an hour each day to do it. So that's how I stumbled across it. It became formalized in my late teens, and then I still am a practitioner now at 50. And I'm fond of saying that all of us are meditators, we just don't know it, because what we're really talking about is meditative states of consciousness. I was fortunate at a young age to develop a practice born of ignorance about it. As for what it's been for my life, almost every major accomplishment in my life I can trace back to being able to attain a meditative state of consciousness because of the level of insight that it provides. I liken it to a hardware upgrade as opposed to a software upgrade, because if I can improve the overall consciousness of my mind, then every other thing that is going on inside, all the years of education I have, all the information that I'm taking in each day as an investor, all of that is made richer and more powerful because the functioning of my mind is made better. So difficult for me to pull out one example. Literally, it's myriad. It's hundreds of examples where meditation is at the core of having made better decisions.
Saurabh, do you meditate yourself as well? How long have you been doing it? And do you think this is a great practice to adopt, especially for people in finance who take stress? I even remember, at one point in time, one of the world's biggest hedge fund managers, Ray Dalio, being asked how did he manage to reach where he is today and what's the secret sauce? And I think it was somewhere in Davos, and the journalist, the answer, which was meditation was the secret. Talk to us about your own experience with meditation, and would you prescribe it especially for people in finance where there is more stress to take care of and handle?
So Ajay, as I see it, right, there are three levels to this, right, which is why someone like Jason on the call is actually is outstanding. There are three levels to it. I can only do the first two levels. Folks like Jason can reach the third level. The first level is in a way the way Ray Dalio articulated. He says that all of us in our professional domain have some fear, right? So, for example, for a long time, I used to be fearful of looking at pharma stocks because I'm not a chemistry graduate. I don't have a background in pharmacology, and hence I used to really struggle to understand what does the pharma company produce, how does the production work, how does the chemistry work, right? So the first level of, in a way, spirituality is understanding what your fears are. Introspecting, as Jason said, introspecting and saying, the reason I am averse to pharma stocks or I worry about pharma stocks is I don't fully understand the chemistry, right? So that's the first level, and I think Ray Dalio has said very clearly in his book Principles that if you're able to introspect and understand your own fears and your prejudices and your risk aversion, you will become a much better investor. That's the sort of most practical level at which I think spirituality or introspection works. The second layer is what I call the healing layer, right? Where all of us, have busy days. We not only are our days busy, we also take a fair bit of stress through the day, right? I'm managing money, you're anchoring shows, your management has expectations of you have your expectations of yourself. My clients have expectations of me. My family has expectations of me. So we need time to heal. We need to recuperate, recharge our batteries. And the simple technique I have used, whilst relaxing at home or on a flight or in a taxi, is to sort of count backwards from 100 back to 1, and letting that distract my egoic mind. This is why I'm so grateful to Jason's book, Intuitive Investor, because he helped me understand why that reverse counting from 100 to 1 is useful, because it distracts the egoic mind and lets your mind relax, lets your mind reflect. And anyway, that's the basic level of meditation that people like me are capable of, right? The more advanced level of meditation, which folks like Jason, folks like Ray Dalio do, is, where they can meditate for far longer with greater intensity, and I think it gives them insights which the average fund manager cannot access. Right? That's the more advanced level of meditation. It takes more practice, more skill, more dedication to hit that level of meditation. And at that level, you start getting insights which other people are not getting. I haven't yet reached there. I aspire to get there one day, Ajay.
Jason, you spoke about 30 minutes to 1 hour every day. Have you felt tangible benefits of it yourself in your life, in your conducting your business, in your output?
Absolutely, yeah. And I'm a big believer in science as well, not just our beloved spirituality through meditation. And scientists have begun testing meditators and naive meditators, meaning people recently introduced to the practice, and they're noting physiological and psychological benefits for meditation in as little as 10 minutes per day. And that's my general advice to beginners is give it 10 minutes per day and keep pursuing the practice. At first, it may seem frustrating. Many people report, feeling humiliated because they can't still their mind instantaneously. And that's the very point. Just as we can't lift, I'm trying to guess the kilos here, 14 kilos in bicep curls at the very beginning of a weightlifting practice, we stay with it because we understand it takes time. Same is true for a meditation practice. And yes, I do get big benefits in 30 to 60 minutes a day.
Great. Let's move on. Saurabh, you've also spoken about extensively in your book about benefits of having reading a lot, reading about great personalities. You've spoken about 3 specific people with in the field of global fund management. Mr. John Bogle, a legendary person, Rob Kirby, and Dr. Mobius. Tell us about your learnings from following these 3 gentlemen who have been really made their mark in global wealth management and money management in their own way. Talk to us about them.
So in a way, if you sort of see the common strands running across, say, people like John Bogle or say Rob Kirby, whose technique of investing was created in America 35, 40 years ago, and we've applied it. I'm sorry about this. There's a drill on. There's how part of the house is being repaired. I'm sorry about the background noise. So if I look at John Bogle's simple technique of index funds, I look at Rob Kirby's technique of coffee can investing, which he created in America in the late 70s, early 80s. And if you say bring someone like Mark Mobius into the picture, who took the whole concept of emerging markets, massified it, turned it into a global phenomenon, right? The message that comes out from studying great investors is figure out, once you get an insight, simplify it. Simplify the insight so that it becomes easy to communicate to millions of people, so that it becomes easy to adopt, easy to follow that practice, and easy to also implement it in practical life. So the index fund concept, right? If John Bogle hadn't had the clarity of thought he did, someone would have made the index fund a very common. He basically went and told the world from 1976 onwards that you don't need a fund manager. I will mimic for you the S&P 500 or the Dow. I'll charge you super low fees, right? And it took 20 years for the concept to catch on, but by the mid-90s, bulk of the American middle class had started latching onto it, and today you have a situation where I think Vanguard manages $6 trillion, Ajay. Similarly, if you take emerging markets and Mark Mobius, in the early 80s, nobody had even heard of the concept. I think through the 80s, World Bank and IFC broadly created this concept of emerging markets. But through the 90s, Mark Mobius popularized it. I think he wrote 3 or 4 books on the subject, Ajay. And by the turn of the century, emerging markets had become a part and parcel of every fund management industry's offering. And today you and I sit in an emerging market and I earn my living from it, right? So once you come up with an insight, simplify the insight. Much as we discuss in the Victory Project, simplification is a massive part of being able to communicate something to millions of people, communicate it to your own colleagues, win their support, win their collaboration, and that thus begins the sort of, what should I say, the proselytization, thus begins the spread of the concept. Whether it's in index funds from John Bogle, coffee can investing from the great Rob Kirby, emerging markets from Mark Mobius, right? And if all of us can do that in our profession, come up with insights, simplify it, and take it to the world outside, in a way that is the essence of outside success, regardless of which line of work you're in.
Jason, You've been deep in finance, you've studied finance, you've managed money, and you're a consultant now, you're a CFA charter holder, and of course, an author. Talk to us about some examples of, personalities which you look up to, which you've read about and researched a lot, and qualities which you've imbibed in your own, be it writing or your work in various ways, as Saurabh was talking about earlier.
I'm going to echo some of what Saurabh said. I've been privileged to meet several great investors. I don't put myself in the category of great investor. I consider myself good. And they include Warren Buffett and the gentleman who founded the firm I used to work at, Shelby Davis. And what I know about them is both of them have the ability, like Delio, probably Saurabh in his burgeoning career, to access these meditative states that we've been talking about during this interview. And they are, exactly as Saurabh describes, able to simplify many things, not just a description of what they're doing in order so it's better communicated, so it spawns new investment styles. If they look at vast amounts of data, they are able to pick out the salient reading on the data. They're able to contextualize that understanding to tease out the insights that nobody else is seeing. And in fact, the reason I wrote The Intuitive Investor was because of a story about Warren Buffett, where one of the folks that worked at the firm I used to work at was sitting by Buffett at the very moment that an annual report came in, and Buffett was thumbing through the annual report, and he looked at a table, and within the table he saw something that triggered his intuition, for lack of a better description, and immediately executed a sale order based on that single number. And if you know Warren Buffett's history, he doesn't do that often. And literally hundreds of other investors digested that same information, but he saw something meaningful in there. And I knew that what he was doing was simplification, right? So here's an entire annual report. One piece of data led to him abandoning a stock, and he's famous for long-term investing. Similarly, the gentleman who used to head my firm, Shelby Davis, had that similar gift of being able to know what was salient. He could listen to an entire presentation by an executive at a firm and know exactly what the one or two things were that were important that were said, and oftentimes they were counterintuitive to what was happening there. The last thing I'll say that I think is true of the greatest investors, like Mobius, for example, like a Bogle, and there's so many others, is that they are themselves. And I know at the heart of that is the ability to do what Saurabh described, which is at first confront your anxieties, because your anxieties are limiting you from crossing personal boundaries that are there artificially because of my fear of something. And then to be able to get rid of your ego and let yourself fully express. And all of the great investors, if you look at the fingerprint of their style, they're all uniquely them. And in meeting them, you actually see the style. And they're the husband, and they are the brother, and they are the investor that brings this style to the world. They have discovered who they are, and they have found a means of expressing that through investing. And I know that that's only possible through a contemplative practice, whatever it might be. They may not be formal meditators, but I know that they're able to achieve these meditative states. And so if anyone in your audience is trying to become their best selves, which the Victory Project argues for, these practices really help you be your best self.
4 years back, one of my gurus, John Kay, asked me to read this book by a German management consultant called Hermann Simon, called Hidden Champions of the 21st Century. I read the book, and it's about how great small cap companies operate across the world. As I read that book, right, I thought, well, how do I adapt this book to India? Because this is a book written very much with America and Europe in mind. And that thought kept percolating in my head for a couple of years. 2 years ago, I met Mark Mobius near the airport in Bombay for a drink in the evening. And he talked about, we basically just had a drink. We talked about, at that time, the 1MDB scandal in Malaysia. That we discussed books he was reading on iPhones and so on. And I told Mark about this book, Hermann Simon's book, and he said, well, surely you can apply this to Indian conditions. And I thought, my God, I've been thinking about this for 2 years, but I haven't got it. But Mark Mobius instinctively believes we can apply Hermann Simon's Hidden Champions of the 21st Century to Indian conditions, right? So literally, I went home that night and I slept on it. And somewhere around 6 o'clock in the morning, when I woke up, right, the whole investment thesis had clicked through in my head as to how you take, in a way, our strengths, Marcellus' strengths around forensic accounting, Herman Simon's philosophy around market leading small caps, i.e. companies who dominate small niches of the industry, take forensic accounting, take leadership in specific niches, and thirdly, look for good capital allocation over 5-6 years. And thus the Little Champs concept was born 1.5 years ago, and it's gone on to become one of the top small cap PMSs in the country. So in a way, it's learning from others, people far smarter than me, Mark Mobius, Herman Simon, and then letting it percolate in my head. Whilst I wish I could do this through meditation, I'm able to do it through sort of light sleep. And then if you let it percolate enough, it finally clicks through in your head, and you have a unique concept which allows you to be useful to your client base.
Well, that's exactly why we love having you on the show all the time, Saurabh, because you truly not only believe, you actually practice what you believe in. Lastly, guys, I would like to discuss something which essentially can be a crux of a lot of stuff which we have discussed in this show and the previous one, and that is for our viewers, how should they go about making a framework for their financial goals. Saurabh, what are your thoughts on that? What would you tell our viewers could be some of the guiding principles of the elements which you've spoken about in your book, and some from your own practice, how our viewers can go about making that framework for financial goals in life?
So, Jay, both in Coffee Can Investing and in the Victory Project, we've given a very simple framework, and a lot of that framework is inspired both by my personal experience of living in India for over a decade now, and an American-Indian author called Ashwin Chhabra. He's written a superb book on how to plan your asset allocation, right? And basically 3 parts to it. First layer is address your fears, build the foundation of your asset allocation in a way so that your personal needs and exigencies are all taken care of, right? So the basic needs of life, make sure they are covered by your investment in risk-free assets. So the first layer is security. The second layer is stability. So make sure that your children's university education, your own pension, your retirement planning is taken care of. So security, basic layer, one level above stability. And the third layer is sort of ambition, aspiration, right? So for many of us, an aspiration is to say have a holiday home in the Himalayas or a holiday home in Goa. So the point we make in the book is make sure you don't confuse your stability aspirations, pension fund, children's university education. Don't confuse that with the holiday home in the Himalayas. Keep the ambition piece separate. And your security layer you address through government bonds and bank deposits. Your stability layer you address through stable large cap investments, things like our consistent compounder portfolio or the Rob Kirby construct. And then for the ambition layer, you can think about ambitious stuff like a good small cap fund or a private equity investment. So 3 layers to your planning: security, stability, ambition, and 3 types of assets that you plonk into each, so that you feel both secure about what you have done, and at the same time you believe you have upside exposure as well.
Mm-hmm. Jason, what would you tell our viewers here in India?
Well, I will echo all of the things that Saurabh said, and I would add that the biggest thing that anyone can do is to live within their means. When people become extended financially, they're spending more than they earn, which is facilitated through things like credit cards. That's when people get into trouble financially. That's where the stability piece that Saurabh highlighted begins to unravel, which then threatens the ambitions and those great financial goals. And I think in the COVID era in particular, many people have been reminded of the fact that the greater amount of debt in your personal income statement, your personal profit and loss, the more pain that we all experience. And that's the only thing I will add there. And maybe one other bit that I have found useful over the years in advising people is don't always think of the long term. To wait for a day 40 years into the future can be quite miserable. And it is okay to enjoy life in the meantime, and also plan for little adventures and little bits of fun, whether that's a night out or whether that's, he mentioned the trip to Goa. Something along those lines makes the saving for the retirement have meaning. And I think that that's the last bit I'll add is when people have meaning for their savings, it's much easier to do and have fun along the way.
Wow. On that really wonderful note, Saurabh and Jason, I'll let you go. Thank you so much for joining us today for the second part of the Victory Project. All my viewers, or ET Now viewers, I'm sure would benefit a whole lot watching these shows and also reading the book Victory Project. This is the book I'm talking about. If you've already not got your copy, I would highly recommend it. And Saurabh, look forward to many more such very interesting books from you going forward. Thank you very much for writing this one and making this show happen. Jason, thank you so much for joining us all the way from Florida. Look forward to seeing more of you on the channel. Gentlemen, both of you, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ajay. Thank you, Jason.